Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. Yes, I'm trying to be a sailor girl today. I hear that, these hats were vintage of 1950?
51.
Say D. Beck on them, and my husband Doug Beck is here to represent which war?
Korea.
And my friend Olen Nations here to represent
World War II.
And Olen put on his uniform. I have it on his word that it wasn't his in the Army, right?
No, that one shrunk too much.
And Douglas is holding his uniform. For what reason, Doug?
It shrank too.
But the hat, I think, really did shrink, but we managed to get it on my head. We're just celebrating our history here at Better Life Television. 10 years. This marks a real first to start a new decade. And we're starting with guests who've been here before and told their story, just a little bit of their story. And I'm anxious to hear more. Olen, you were a soldier boy where and when?
Went in the service in 1943, came out in 46.
And why did you go into the service?
I was invited by President Roosevelt. He sent me a personal letter, invited me to join the service, and
you
I
just couldn't resist.
I accepted. I couldn't resist.
You have served then in the South Pacific?
Yes.
Now, Doug, on the other hand, how did you get into the Navy?
Well, I explained it to some Korean CEOs that came to visit us at SRI. One of them was Hyundai, one of them was one of the big steel outfits there. We allowed as to how we had, a friend of mine and I had been in North Korea, and I wondered if they had ever been there. No, we haven't been in North Korea. Gee whiz. Oh, you were heroes? No, my country asked me to go and I volunteered. And that's what I did.
Well, I do actually know a little bit about the volunteering because your father had a little hand in that. He said something like, do you want to be drafted into the Army or?
Go into the Navy, get some training, learn how to do something.
This is a kid from high school with Southern Oregon, no.
I got moved here in 1943, and about as far as I had ever been from here since then was down to San Francisco once or twice. And you can imagine the terror that struck into the heart of an 18-year-old to wind up in boot camp in San Diego.
Well, you have a picture right here to show off.
Well, that's not the boot camp picture. That's from when I was in electronic technician training.
Well, now, where did you do boot camp and where did you, Olen?
Took basic training in Abilene, Texas, Camp Barkley, and from that point, we went over to Camp Beale, and we sailed out to the South Pacific in May of 44.
Well, now, why were you at Camp Beale?
Well, we just one of the taking off places to go overseas. I mean, anyway, we were there for just a short time.
Okay, now you had special, you went in as a medic, did I understand?
Yes, I was in the Medical Cadet Corps, the Adventists trained us, Then we went into the service, and I was in the medics.
Well, the reason is that as a church, we've always taken a stand that supporting humanity and health and doing what we can for our country without taking a life.
Well, we'd rather save lives than take them, and actually we can provide a real service, and by doing that with that attitude in mind, we can do a lot of good.
And I understand in World War II, when the medic, the insignia of Red Cross was sometimes used as target practice. So a lot of medics didn't make it home. We're glad you did.
Oh, yes. The Lord has really blessed me in my life, and He's been so good to me, more than I deserve.
Well, Olen, when you came back home, Southern Oregon, what was your first thought?
Well, I wanted to find work, and worked in the sawmills and different things like that. One thing that the Army helped me out quite a bit is that they paid my way through school, and one of the fellows told me, "You ought to stay here in the sawmill. Don't go to school." But I thought it's a good idea. If the Army's if the government is going to pay for my way, I mean, I've got to go. So they paid my way almost through academy and college. I took a GED test in Grants Pass High School, and I have a high school diploma from Grants Pass High School. But I went on to Auburn Academy and got a diploma from that. So I have 2 high school diplomas.
Uh-huh. Well, now, and the reason you hadn't finished school before you went in the military,
The folks needed me. I helped make a living for the family.
a family
and,
of what?
About 13, more or less. Well, it varied a little bit, but my mother's had 14 children. My dad had 2 before, so.
Yeah, that looks
16.
like 16 plus mom and dad. That kind of adds up to 18 in
Well,
the family.
But we were never home all at the same time. But
they,
there were plenty of us.
and they sure needed you.
And I worked on these projects like the housing for the airmen, and I worked on the various projects as a carpenter.
Oh,
And,
so you knew something besides being a medic.
And then when I went into the service, I was the company carpenter. It was not an official thing, but I was the carpenter of the outfit.
And Doug, how did you get into your slot in the Navy? What was the...
Well, sometime before I went in, I became interested in amateur radio. And that led me to get into this, and
A ham nose code.
and a little bit about electronics, and the Navy added to it substantially. And then once I got out, like Olen, I went back to school, got a college degree, and found a wife, and off we went.
And Olen, when did you find this wife of choice?
Oh, yes. Well, we knew each other at Auburn Adventist Academy, but we started going together in college. And she took nursing, and she was in Portland, and I was at Walla Walla. So I graduated in the summer class of '52, and I waited a whole week to get married after I graduated,
Now,
1952.
this is before you went overseas?
No,
After.
after.
And Douglas, your story is a little similar.
Yeah, but I didn't even wait to graduate. We got married at Christmas just before graduation.
So it's how many years for you, Olen?
The other day we celebrated our 54th.
Well, congratulations. And old Doug and I have been married,
47 years now.
I think it's going to last for both of us.
Well, yes, might as well stay together.
You know, I'm so proud of the leadership that I have seen you and Mary. Was just really up at one of the nursing homes recently. I know that you started out with carpentry there, didn't you?
I had built quite a few houses, and I built the nursing homes, and
Not
Then
one or two, but
4.
3 or 4.
4. And it just came naturally. I was a builder, and my wife's a nurse, so we just did our thing.
Well, I sure appreciate it. We have spent many an hour in care facilities and so appreciative of the kindness shown to Doug's mother, who has recently passed away, and to my other friend who passed away in Royal Gardens this week. You know, what a service you folks have offered. Douglas, would you tell me about being a sailor boy on the north? You were up
Well,
in Korea.
I've been as far north as Sanjin, which is up by the Manchurian border, and I've been down into the Philippines.
Well, now you had some Philippine experience,
No.
didn't you?
I went from New Caledonia to Guadalcanal, and was in Guadalcanal for about 8 months. Actually, I was attached to the old Army Air Corps. It's before they had the separate branch of the
Before there
Air
was
Force.
an Air Force?
Yes, before it was an Air Force.
Aha.
And our duty was to patrol the area around Solomon Islands. We had teletype message out to send to the, mostly the New Zealanders. They would fly these Corsairs, these F-4Us or gull-wing planes, and they would patrol the area, and we knew where the ships were at all times, and so they would patrol to make sure that a sub didn't get them.
Well, now, technology changed.
Japanese sub.
Technology changed a little in the time that the two of you were in there, right? You probably didn't have the radar that he had to operate. Was radar happening?
They were
they
just
had-
getting it.
I think they had radar.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf was one of the first ones that was fought between capital ships, in which neither side saw the other one. The Japanese never knew what hit them. We just first salvoed them right to the bottom.
And I understand that technology played a very, very big part in the European theater. Had we not had that, we might have, England would have been singing a much different anthem. But neither of you were out in the Atlantic.
No, thank goodness.
I pretty well kept up with what was going on in Europe. It was interesting. Every day we could see how the battles were going. And
Well, every
But
time
as-
you opened your Life magazine, there was a story about one of the soldier boys. This is 50 cents for the magazine, 1970.
There'd be Vietnam War stuff there.
Would you trade America for any place else that you could live?
it's wonderful to be American.
Doug, what do you think?
I am perfectly happy living in Merlin,
Being an American,
being an American. you betcha.
Oregonian, Merlinite, how could we be so lucky?
Accident of birth, dear.
Doug, you brought a little magic bag there. I know
yeah.
how you treasure it.
This is-
Robin made that for you.
Yes, yes. This is something you get from being in the service. What do we got here? There is the American Service Medal. All you got to do is just get a hold of the Veterans Administration, tell them you want these things, they'll tell you how to get them. There's, that's the UN medal. Korean Service Medal. And last but not least, my Good Conduct Medal.
Now, Olen, I see here on your sleeve and your shoulder, what are these all?
I think one of them is a good conduct, and I don't know what the other is. I forgot.
Okay,
It's been so long.
And over here are
These-
stripes and
These
stripes.
marks, actually, I should have the third stripe here because each stripe represents 6 months overseas. So I was over about 22 months, so I had the third stripe. And that's about it.
Well, I sure want to thank you guys. I tell you, this country has been kept free with lots of hard work from soldier boys and sailor boys. You've got something to say about our country. What has it meant to you to be a serviceman? Thanks to the GI Bill, you both have educations.
You know, this country was a new experiment when this country was founded. Democracy. And we hope that eventually all the countries will have democracy.
Freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Based on the will of the people,
Absolutely right.
for the people.
Doug, it's important. You've been all over the Pacific. There's no place like home.
No. God bless America.
You know, the feeling we got when we were sailing back from overseas to see the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance really brought chills.
So you
And then
can
here the ship came out with the band playing When Johnny Comes Marching Home. You know? What
Oh.
a feeling.
Now, Doug, San Francisco has some memories.
Well, I've been under the bridge 3 times now, and
Wearing sailor clothes.
wearing sailor clothes, and
You had only one time coming
We-
back home?
Just one time.
no bands. And I got out and went home, and Dad looked up from the dinner table and he says, "Gee, where have you been? You know, you hungry?"
Well, Doug tells me he never even wore this hat, but it's sure spiffy, if you ask me. And the scarves. Did you save all of your military things, or in 50-some years they've...
No, I guess I never thought about it. I was so glad to get out.
You were.
Yes.
What was it like to be, you ate, what did you eat while you were in the military? Little rations?
Well, they had pretty good food. One thing I missed was milk.
Yeah?
We had some kind of powdered stuff, I don't know. And, you know, one thing I missed was not hearing a train whistle.
Oh.
You know, they didn't have any trains.
No trains.
You know, I missed that. So when we were headed back, we got pretty close to Hawaii on our way back. And no, one of the fellows says, "Man, you hear that?" You know, when he heard that train whistle. So.
Oh, Peggy Carpenter tells the story of growing up out in Williams, and that was, she came to town to pick hops with the community, and she was so excited because she could hear the train whistle, and you can't, in Williams, of course, there's no train. Olen, I know a few things about your family. What was, I guess it was before you went in the military, you had a bunkhouse out here, and the wagon, the trailer that brought you out west from with the family was turned into your bunkhouse?
Well, Dad had one of the earliest motorhomes. We called it a house car.
Okay.
And we moved I was born in Texas, and I was just a young lad when we moved from Texas to Arizona, and we moved out in that house car. And one of the earliest recollections I have, I remember I remember seeing the scenery. I remember the cactus of Arizona. We moved out to Arizona because of my mother's asthma. She got over it there. And anyway, went to schools in Arizona, graduated from the 8th grade in 1939, and I got involved with building these these barracks for the airmen, and working on the airport hangars, the airplane hangars, different things like that. And
And you're how old at this time?
oh, I was about 17.
Or 16?
16, 17. 16, 17, then 18 I went into the service.
On a previous show, I know you told us that you shared a pair of shoes with your brother. Were those times?
Did I? Most of the time I didn't wear shoes.
2 reasons for that, right?
Well, I didn't like to bind my feet up so much.
You'd outgrown last year's shoes.
Yeah.
And Doug, when you came out to Oregon, it was a big deal too, during tough times.
Hey, Dad had a 1937 Chevrolet 2-door sedan then. We pulled everything we owned in a 4-wheel trailer behind us. And Dad got an offer of a job with the Siskiyou National Forest and the Air Warning Service. They kept all the lookouts manned around here 24/7 looking for Japanese airplanes in those days. So he would, snowshoe up and down all these hills taking care of the radios.
24 hours a day.
That's right. They kept them going.
Now, did he have stories to tell you, or was this hush-hush about what he heard and found out?
There were some things he didn't say too much about, like the shelling over by Brookings. Until after the war, we didn't know much about that.
And Olen, had you heard anything about Brookings being shelled?
I'd heard that the Japanese sent some balloons over.
Yeah, this is before that even. They had a submarine that surfaced off there.
Yeah, I didn't.
Well, out at Pottsville, and I invite all of you to go see Deb's collection. He was an archivist. That's my brother's polite term for a junk collector, and which I am, and just happened to have a few sailor hats and things that I'm proud to have kept for Doug all these years. But Deb's said, one of his loggers said, I felled the tree and I don't know what I found. And Deb looked at it, and sure enough, here it was, a ring like this with incendiary
Bombs.
No, not. They'd make fire.
Yeah.
I guess, and they would catch the Oregon forests on fire and destroy America. That was the thinking. What happened?
They launched them during the wet season.
And right out here, this one, particular one, which you can see at Pottsville, was found on Walker Mountain by Debs and one of his hired fellows. And I'm told that there were others, but I've never been able to verify any other detail about Grants Pass or Medford, or we know one that landed down in Blythe, which was the tragedy of tragedies, which it exploded and it killed the children on an outing, a church outing. But
Never heard that.
Thanks for doing what you could to keep us safe and free over here in Oregon. Olen, what do you think of looking back over how many years now? You've been to
60.
You've been to a reunion. Where did you go?
You mean as far as the service is concerned? We went back to the South Pacific. It seemed like it was about 12 years ago. I saw this advertisement, and I was so curious. And the one of the ones that was in charge of this cruise was his name was Ferris, and I wonder if he could be related to the Norman Ferris, who was a returned missionary to Guadalcanal. And sure enough, it was his son. The returned missionary and his wife were killed. He was killed in an automobile crash about 10 years, I think, after the war in New Zealand. She was on the ship with us at that time. I'm sure she's not living now. She was about 92, something like that. Anyway, this one son was on, and two daughters, and I could tell you about it's quite an interesting story about the one daughter. She fell overboard. They'd hit a rock below the surface. They didn't see it, and when she was shoved overboard. She lost her balance, went overboard. I guess she must have been even less than just a young child. And Katarangaso was on board there. He's a big, young, strapping native there. He dived into the water, came up without her, and he got his breath and went back in the water. And he was down there so long they feared that he had drowned, but pretty soon he came up with her, and she was on the ship with us. And
she was a healthy, normal child?
Yeah.
That's a wonderful story. This was part of your memories of Guadalcanal?
Yes. He came back, that is, the missionary came back after the war, and we liked to visit with him, go and visit with him. And he had some of us help him out with bringing material over to redo Betacama School. And it's
Some-
turned out to be quite a school. We visited that school when we were there about 12 years ago, and it's a thriving school now.
Now, Doug, what have you done with your Japanese experience? You use Japanese television and Japanese computers and Japanese.
And I like to eat at a Japanese restaurant.
That's absolutely the truth. Well, we thank you both for being on Better Life Television, and we thank you for serving all 48 stars here on this banner hung, I believe, on Main Street, welcoming home the veterans of World War II.
That's how many stars we had on the flag when I was in the service, 48.
And Doug? 48.
I think we had 48 somewhere in there.
Sure. Well, it's just been a privilege that our America is free and we are able to worship freely and we are able to say thank you. Thank you to those who have kept us free.
The best country in the world.
And you've been to a few, haven't
Yes.
you, Olen?
Yes.
Doug, too.
And he's just getting ready to go over and see some more.
You're going to.
We're going to London. From there, we'll get on the ship and cruise over to. In fact, we're going to. I think the very next day, we're going to visit the Normandy where they landed. And
Great.
And,
Safe